You know that particular ache, the one that shows up at 11 at night, phone in your hand, thumb scrolling past hundreds of faces you technically know, and still something in your chest feels hollow, like a room with the lights on, but nobody home. It's a strange kind of pain, because nothing is actually wrong. You have a roof, food, maybe even people who love you asleep in the next room. And yet, the feeling persists, quiet and insistent, like a smoke alarm going off in a house with no fire. Now picture a different scene entirely. 30 people, give or take, huddled around a fire that never truly goes dark, because someone always has to keep it fed. Bodies close enough to feel each other's warmth through the night. Someone grinding a tool a few feet from you. Someone else's child asleep against your shoulder, because that's simply where children slept. There was no door to close, no wall to lean against, and finally exhale alone. For most of human history, this was the baseline. Not a retreat, not a cozy family gathering you chose to attend. It was survival, and it was constant, and it left almost no room for solitude at all. Here's the part that should stop you for a second. In that world, isolation wasn't an inconvenience. It was closer to a death sentence. Wander too far from the group, get cast out for breaking some unspoken rule, and you weren't just missing out on company. You were facing the cold without a second set of hands to help you survive it. Hunting without the eyes of others to spot the predator you couldn't see. Healing from injury without anyone to bring you water while you couldn't stand. Exile in the ancient world didn't mean awkward silence. It meant hunger. It meant exposure. Often, it meant you simply didn't make it. So here's the question worth sitting with. If early human life was this tightly packed, this constantly, unavoidably social, where on earth did loneliness even come from? What was there to be lonely for when you were never actually alone? The answer, as far as we can tell, is almost the opposite of what you'd expect. Loneliness didn't appear because people were isolated too often. It appeared because isolation was so dangerous that the body needed a way to punish even the idea of it. Think of loneliness less as an emotion and more as an alarm system, something closer to physical pain than to sadness. Just as your body evolved to feel pain from a burn so you'd yank your hand back before real damage was done, it likely evolved something similar for social distance. A kind of internal siren that says, you are drifting from the group, and drifting means danger. So fix this now, before it's too late. That ache you feel isn't a malfunction. It's a warning system doing exactly the job it was built for, thousands of generations before anyone had a phone to check or a feed to scroll through. But knowing that the alarm existed only deepens the strangeness, because it raises another question. If everyone was already pressed together constantly, when would that alarm have ever even needed to go off? The answer is that closeness back then wasn't just physical. It was relentless in a way that's almost hard to picture from where you're sitting now. Grooming, for instance, wasn't some occasional spa treatment. Among early human groups, much like our primate relatives today, picking through each other's hair, skin, and scalp was a daily, hours-long ritual, one that built trust, released a flood of calming brain chemistry, and quietly reinforced who belonged to whom. It wasn't optional. It was social glue, applied by hand every single day. Tasks weren't private either. Hunting was coordinated, tool-making was often communal, food was shared because a lone hunter's bad day meant a starving night without the group's surplus to fall back on. Even rest wasn't a private act. You slept where the group slept, ate when the group ate, moved when the group moved, which means privacy, as you understand it now, barely existed at all. There was no bedroom door, no quiet drive home to decompress, no headphones to signal. Not right now. Your entire existence was witnessed, almost without pause, by the same 30 or so people who would also be the ones keeping you alive. And that's exactly what made exclusion so devastating. It wasn't simply hurt feelings if the group turned cold toward you. It was the sudden absence of every safety net you had. The people who would have warned you about the lion in the grass. The hands that would have helped you carry water. The fire that would have kept you from freezing overnight. All of it. Gone the moment you were pushed to the outside. So when that ancient alarm fired, when loneliness rose up in someone's chest, it wasn't a vague mood to shrug off. It was the body sensing something close to mortal danger and reacting the only way it knew how, by making isolation feel unbearable enough that you'd claw your way back toward the group before the cold the hunger, or the predator did the rest. In a world built on constant proximity, loneliness wasn't proof that something was wrong with you. It was proof that the system meant to keep you alive was working exactly as intended. Now take that same alarm system and drop it into your world. Into apartment buildings stacked 20 stories high, where you can hear your neighbor's footsteps through the ceiling but couldn't pick their face out of a lineup. Into cities holding millions of people, where you can stand shoulder to shoulder with strangers on a train and feel more unseen than you ever would alone in a forest. Into open floor plan offices, crowded lecture halls, group chats with 40 unread messages, and a phone that buzzes every few minutes with someone, somewhere, saying something to someone else. The alarm your ancestors carried for exactly one reason, to pull them back toward the 20 or 30 people who kept them alive, is still installed in you. It still fires. But it was built for a world where firing meant walking back to a fire that was still burning, to hands that would still make room for you. Now, it fires in places where there's no clear group to walk back to at all. You can be surrounded on every side and still feel the exact same ancient signal that once meant, get back to the band before nightfall. This is where the size of that ancient world starts to matter more than it first seems. The number that keeps surfacing across different research on human social groups, informally known as Dunbar's number, sits at around 150, not as a hard ceiling stamped into your biology, but as a rough, repeatedly observed limit on how many relationships a human mind can hold with any real depth, the kind where you know someone's history, their moods, their obligations, to you and yours, to them. Inside that 150, researchers describe even tighter rings. A handful of people, maybe 5, who you'd call in a genuine crisis at 3 in the morning. A slightly larger circle of close friends. A wider layer of people you'd invite to something significant in your life. The number is fuzzy. The edges move depending on who's studying it, but the pattern holds up again and again. Human connection, the kind that actually buffers you against loneliness, has always had a ceiling. Even in the deep past, nobody was bonded to 1,000 people. They were bonded to a few dozen, deeply, and that was enough. Which is where the strange cruelty of the modern world quietly reveals itself. You can have thousands of followers and 0 people who would notice if you didn't come home. You can be in 40 group chats and still lie awake feeling like nobody actually knows you. That's not a personal failure, and it's not proof that something in you is broken. It's the oldest limit in human social life running into an environment that was never built with that limit in mind. Feeds are engineered to feel like belonging without requiring the reciprocity that real belonging always demanded. A like is not a hand passing you water. A comment is not someone noticing you didn't show up and coming to check on you. The ancient brain doesn't know the difference between a crowd that would die for you and a crowd that simply happens to be online at the same time you are, so it keeps waiting for a kind of closeness that the format was never designed to deliver. And this is really where the bigger question from the start of all this finally gets its answer. It's tempting to imagine ancient humans as somehow tougher, more resilient, better equipped to shrug off isolation than you are. But that's not what kept them from being crushed by loneliness. They weren't stronger. They were embedded. Every single day put them in physical contact with the same handful of people, doing shared work, sharing food, sharing risk, so that the possibility of true isolation almost never had room to open up in the first place. Loneliness back then was less something you endured and more something you were rescued from automatically, just by the structure of daily life. Nobody had to manage their loneliness with willpower, because the environment itself kept refilling the well before it ever ran dry. What's changed isn't the size of the alarm, it's the disappearance of the automatic rescue. Today, you can move to a new city for work and lose your entire social web in a single afternoon. You can live alone, work from a laptop, order everything delivered, and go days without a single sustained conversation, all while your phone tells you that you're more connected than any generation in history. That contradiction is exactly what's now being described, plainly and publicly, as a loneliness epidemic, serious enough that public health officials have started treating disconnection itself as a risk to physical health, not just an uncomfortable feeling to push through. The alarm hasn't gotten louder because people have gotten weaker. It's gotten louder because, for the first time in the species' story, huge numbers of people are living with almost none of the tightly woven web that used to catch them the moment isolation began. So when that heaviness shows up, uninvited, in a crowded room or in the blue light of a phone screen at midnight, it isn't a glitch in you. It's a signal doing exactly the job it evolved to do. Sounding an alarm meant for a world of 30 people you saw every single day, in a world now built out of strangers, screens, and distances that ancient biology never had to account for. The feeling is old. Older than cities, older than language probably. What changed is everything around it. The world rebuilt itself in a few thousand years while the signal underneath stayed almost exactly the same. So the next time it rises in you without warning, you might recognize it for what it actually is. Not a flaw, not a weakness, just a very old voice, still calling you back toward a fire that, in this version of the world, you have to learn how to build all over again.